A very good morning, everyone. Today we'll be starting the unit first of our course AGCon 302, that is Farm Management, Production and Resource Economics. Hello, I am Dr. Sanjay, Assistant Professor in the Department of Agricultural Economics, and I'll be the tutor of this course for all of you guys. So let's begin with the unit first, which is just an introduction. What are farms and what is farm management actually? These are the contents of our first lecture, or you can say our first unit. What is farm management? What does it deal with? What kind of decisions does a farmer make? What kind of relationship does this farm management has with other sciences? What are farms? How do we classify them? Their classifications, and what are the factors determining those classifications? Okay, and in the end, where should you go to read more about the topic? So, what do we actually mean by farm management? It is just a branch of economics which deals with how a person organizes and operates his farm for two purposes. Essentially, he wants a continuous maximum net income plus his family to be happy. So, this is all about, and or you can say this is the beginning of farm management. It is a branch of economics which tells us how we should organize our farm, how we should operate our farm for maximum net income, or you can say maximum net profit for the coming years continuously, and plus essentially the happiness of the farm family. This is the most important thing. What is included inside farm management? So what can you expect from farm management, or what you will be learning under farm management? This is just a broad outline of those things. It is essentially microeconomic in scope. That means it relates to a farm, not any bigger entity. It does not relate to entire farming community, or can say entire country or entire farming community of the globe. It relates to single farm. Okay. uh, then economic efficiency, that means that in terms of rupees it means maximum net returns. That is, net returns means profits. A farm should get maximum profit for the money or for the resources it has with itself. Okay. All factors of production, how he is going to get these maximum net returns by the best possible utilization of all four factors of production, which has been taught earlier to you. What are these factors of production? Land, labor, capital, that is rupees, a capital in terms of rupees or in terms of machineries and tools, and organization, that is essentially your organizational skills or your management skill, how you are going to manage these three things for getting maximum profits. What kind of decisions are to be are there inside farm management? uh, what farm management tells us about our farms, that what crops should we grow based on some economic principles. I'm really very sorry for the sound that is coming in the background, but I cannot do much about it. So what are the enterprises one should follow according to your location of your farm? See, there are some climatic foundations that you can pursue only some types of enterprises, and out of those, which one is most beneficial for you? Let's say, out of all types of livestock, which type of livestock you should rear, so which will give you maximum possible net returns. Okay. What should be the dosage of your fertilizers to get maximum net returns? Fertilizers is just an example, or let's say all other inputs to get maximum net returns. How you should be utilizing your labor and capital to get maximum net returns, and what types of implements you are supposed to use to get maximum net returns. It's simple. Whatever you are going to do on your farm to get maximum money is essentially a part of farm management. How you are going to manage your resources, how are you going to plan to produce things, everything comes under farm management. What are the objectives? First objective, as I have already told you, is wait a second. already told you in the very first slide, continuous net returns, maximum continuous net returns plus maximum family satisfaction. This is the prime objective. Maximum money, maximum happiness plus maximum happiness. Okay, how we are going to do this? First of all, you are going to study what kind of resources you have on your farm, then where these resources are being utilized in less than optimal manner. That what it means is less than the best possible way, where they are being misutilized, you can say. Okay, then how do we find out a procedure and how do we correct that deviation? Deviation means best possible use and misuse that we are doing. This we are going to find out using our farm management principles, and this is the actual study of the farm and how do we correct it from misuse to best possible use. Okay, then in the end, to work out the cost and returns of individual enterprises and and on the farm as a whole. Enterprises, this word will be used again and again. It simply means whatever you're growing, either you're growing a crop, which kind of a crop, it is an enterprise, or you're rearing livestock, what types of livestock, or you can say whether if you're doing mixed enterprises or mixed type of farming. Enterprise generally means what thing you're following on the farm, what crop you're growing. Okay, that is an enterprise. Working out the cost and returns. Returns means simply the money you're getting back. Cost means the money you're putting in any enterprise. Then comes what are the decisions that a farmer makes on a farm. Some decisions are organizational, which are taken once in a while. Okay, operational decisions are taken regularly to in the regular day-to-day running of a farm. Marketing decisions are also taken while buying inputs and while selling output. Okay, these are also once in a while thing. Organizational decisions, as I said, once in a while, that means once in a long period. You're going to decide in advance that what kind of crop you're going to produce. In the same the other way of saying this is selection of enterprise based on the resource availability. Let's say you decided to produce paddy, but you do not have enough water to support paddy, so naturally you cannot select this enterprise and you will have to definitely go for some other crop. Or okay, you might go for cotton or might go for pearl millet, you might go for maize. Okay, but certainly it will not paddy because water is the resource that you do not have to sustain paddy on your farm. How much you should produce based on the money you have, how much of the area of cotton you should produce. Because if you're trying to, let's say you have a lot of area but you do not have cash in hand to buy inputs, so you cannot essentially support a lot of cotton area. You will have to restrict yourself to the area for which you have money to buy the inputs. Okay, you might have 100 acres of land but you have cash for buying inputs of 50 acres of cotton, so essentially go for 50 acres of cotton. How to produce? What are the methods available in the market which are the most cost efficient, let's say least expensive? Estimating the labor and machinery requirements in advance. Once you decide what you are going to produce and how much you are going to produce, you must know when you will be needing labor and when you will be needing machinery and how you are going to acquire it. Will you be renting it, will you be buying it? So these decisions need to be taken in advance, whether the labor is available or not. Okay, estimating the credit needs. Whenever you will be falling short, or let's say you have some money and you need more than that money to sustain your crop, so you should have an idea where you will be getting the money from. It might be from your relatives, okay, it might be from a bank, it might be from a village artia, or you can say village money lender. You should have a fair idea of these things. Planning additional building, let's say for storage purposes or for living, you need to plan these things out because it takes a lot of money and takes a lot of time. You do not want to spend much money more than that you have, and you do not want to start the construction at a time when you are busy with other things. Another thing is planning soil conservation practices that are to be adopted. If your soil is problematic, you need to think of when and how I am going to improve my soil. What are the conservation practices I should follow? These are once in a while decisions that a farmer make, which comes under farm management. And operational decisions are simple: what varieties you will be growing, what will be the time and method of sowing. Agronomic practices, I can say, plant protection measures, preparation of work schedule and their supervision, accounting of costs and bookkeeping of cost and returns, adjustment with government programs and policies. Once in a while there is a change in the government procurement policy. Let's say the crop you have grown, the government is going to purchase it at this percent moisture. Okay, let's say 8% moisture for rapeseed and mustard. So you need to dry it out in the field before taking it to the market. Okay, making some these small adjustments, buying of inputs and selling of output, that is the thing you have produced. These kind of decisions are to be taken by the farmer. And there are many more decisions you can think of. Just use your mind and you can write whatever that comes to your mind, but these are essentially divided into three parts. Okay, so just think of a decision that a farmer makes and put them under these categories. This list is not exhaustive, you can add to it whatever you want. Okay, what are the relationships of farm management with other sciences? Or you can say a farm manager should have the knowledge of all these sciences, or he develops a knowledge of all these sciences while he is being a farm manager. He gets to have knowledge of agronomy because he knows how to cultivate a crop. Okay, so this is the relationship with agronomy. What is the relationship with chemistry? As the last point in the soil conservation practices, I said there is some sort of deficiency in the soil. A farmer must get it tested, and after getting it tested, he knows that this is the deficiency and this is the solution. So, in a way, he has a knowledge of how things work, how the chemistry is related to his farm. Okay, ways to correct it. Knowledge of botany. What is the most congenial environment for the particular crop he is having? Which species of, let's say, which variety of that crop is going to sustain best, and what he should do at what time should he give water so that the micro environment of the crop is best maintained, and therefore the output is best possible. Plant breeding practices. Some farmers are into breeding. They save seeds of the best looking plants in their field, or the plants with the the most desired characteristics. So, due to repeated, or can say due to their experience, they are in a habit of developing their own new varieties by saving seeds and replanting them from time and again, and also saving the indigenous varieties. These indigenous varieties have specific qualities, or specific qualities in their DNA. Okay, and these qualities can later on be used by plant breeders to develop varieties having these qualities plus other desired positive qualities. Let's say it has a good taste. This variety of rice has a good taste, but it has a problem of pest attack. So that breeder can develop a new variety that has good taste plus disease resistance, disease or pest attack resistance. Okay, so these indigenous varieties serve as a gene pool. So a can say farmer generally has knowledge about these things also. Agricultural engineering, necessarily he has lots of machines and tools he knows how to use and to repair. So he definitely has some knowledge of agricultural engineering. Animal husbandry, a farmer who is into livestock raising, they have pretty good knowledge about the diseases, the feeding practices, the maintenance practices of an animal when they can get sick, how to can say make their health better, how to make their quality better, can say they also know about breeding of animals. you know Generally a farmer who has a buffalo tries to get semen from a better bull, even if it is from far side of the state. Okay. Sociology, community environment in relation to agriculture. It simply means what are the relationship between farmers who are functioning side by side. How are they farming? What are the, let's say, cultural relationship between them? Are they functioning individually? Are they celebrating their festivals collectively? What is the collective psychology? That simply means how the rural society is engaging with each other. Okay. What kind of relationship they have, what kind of psychology works between them. Then comes psychology, understanding the choices, behavior, attitude, and motivational factor. These things are also related with economics. They might not sound, but they are related with economics. Understanding how a farmer makes choices, why his behavior is as it is right now, what is his attitude towards the new technology that is coming in, what are the factors that are motivating him to adopt a new technology or not adopt a new technology. So these things are also studied under economics. Okay, necessarily simple economics also, but also under behavioral economics. Okay, then comes what is a farm. A farm is generally it's you know what a farm is, but you need to know how to put it into words. It is simply an area of land which is primarily devoted to agriculture. Okay, and the main motive of it is producing food plus income also. But first one is producing food for themselves and getting some income. There are some specialized farms, vegetables farm, which are into vegetable cultivation, fruit farms, or can say orchards, dairy, pig and poultry farms, ranches, feedlots, and orchards. We'll be understanding the meaning later on. And plantation crops like tea, coffee, these are also called estates also. uh, it also includes farmhouse and agricultural buildings plus the land. Okay, so this is essentially a farm, a piece of land which is devoted to agriculture. What type of agriculture? These type. If it is specialized, they might call it a special with a special name. And what is a farmstead? Farmstead is an English name given to a farm along with its buildings. Okay, they just don't call it a farm. Farm along with the buildings and all the things in it is also called as a farmstead. Farmstead and farm, they are generally used in as synonyms. Classification of farms or farming. This classification is quite common. This guy Johnson gave a definition which I have just laid it out in form of a table of the classification of farms, or can say farming. We're using these two terms synonymously. Types of farms or types of farming, or systems of farms or systems of farming. What do you mean by type of a farm? See, here we look at the proportion of crops and livestock that let's say we have hundreds of farm we are going to study, and we find out that the proportion of crop and livestock in all of them is, let's say, 70% of their resources go to crop production and 30% to livestock production. Okay, and their practices are also the same. So what can we say to them? They are all 100 farms are specialized farm. They are into crop production because 70% of their income is coming from crop production. Okay. So type of farming, we look at, for studying the type of farming, we look at the proportion and the methods and practices. What is the further classification? Specialized farm and specialized farming, ranching, diversified farming, mixed farming, and dry farming. Five types of farming. Okay. Then comes system of farming. System of farming, we will be looking at two things: ownership of land and resources, who owns those resources on the farm, and who owns the land, and operationship, how the general day-to-day life decisions are being made. Okay, is the farmer who is owner of the land, that person is making those decisions, or someone else is making those decisions? These systems of farming are further classified into five types: cooperative, which has further classification; state farming; collective; capitalist; and peasant farming. Okay, we will be studying now type of farming. Types of farming. Wait a second. Types of farming, we have five types of farming. We'll be studying them one by one: specialized, diversified, mixed, ranching, and dry. SDMRD. Easy way to remember all these things. Although once you just pay attention, you will be getting them fairly easily. Specialized farming. Just remember, we are looking at the proportion of livestock and crop enterprises and the methods and practices that are being followed. This constitutes types of farming. Okay, specialized farming, when most of your income is coming from a single source. Okay, more than 50%. Let's say that is an orchard. Orchard, what kind of orchard you are looking at? You can call it a winery or anything. There is a problem with the pen. Okay, more than 50% of your income is coming from an orchard, then you are a specialized farm. What are the advantages of it? You'll be knowing, due to repeated same crop taking repeatedly, you know how to best possibly use your land. You are efficient in marketing of your product. You get to know about more places where you can market your product for a better price. You'll be able to do management job in a better way because you'll be doing these things repeatedly. Okay, less equipment and labor. You will not be needing unnecessary equipment and labor, which you might be needing when you have more than one things at hand. Yes, despite raising an orchard, you're also bringing in your income from livestock rearing. Let's say you're rearing livestock for milk purpose, so you'll be needing some equipment. Let's say milking equipment, their cleaning equipment, their flooring, and let's say their cooling equipment, or machines for cutting the, say, fodder. So those equipment are unnecessary, and in terms of specialized farming, you'll not be needing them. Plus, you can bring in costly and efficient machinery. As your farm is highly specialized, you know where to cut costs, and you know where you should be investing the most to bring in better returns. Let's say you bought a harvesting machinery, so you'll be harvesting uh, pretty easily with less cost, and you can say you can even rent that out machinery for recovering the cost to other farms. Plus, your efficiency and skill increases when you're doing one thing again and again. What are the risks? There is a huge risk. Even one small pest can destroy all your income, all your crop. There is a burden on the soil because your crop is needing and taking, can say, extracting the same types of nutrients again and again and again and again from the soil. Okay, so there develops an acute scarcity of those nutrients. These things get, can say, difficult to manage in the long run. Farm returns are highly fluctuating because it all depends on prices of your produce. You just have one produce. If the prices are high, your returns are high. If the prices are low, your returns are low. Okay, general knowledge of a farmer is limited. In terms of, can say, wideness, it's not wide. Your knowledge is not wide. Your knowledge is deep but not wide. Okay, then comes diversified farming. All these pictures, you are raising paddy, you are cultivating crops, you have some pigs, you are also rearing livestock for, and so selling them for meat at the end of their life, and otherwise using them for dairy products, you're also having chicken for eggs and selling them for meat. So when you are single source, when none of them is giving you income more than 50%, that means you are following diversified farming. Okay, let's say this is giving you 20%, 20%, 30%, 30%, and how much it is left? Oh, it's gone 20%, and again 10% income from poultry. So this is diversified farming. What are the advantages? You'll be having less risk. Prices of one thing might go high, and other thing might go low. So your income remains stable. Proper utilization of products and byproducts. Byproduct of this can be used here and here. Okay, and also of poultry manure, and also of piggery. So better utilization of resources is here, and you can use these things for, you can say, some types of insects also. And the manpower also can be utilized in raising paddy. The manpower is most used when you're sowing or when you're harvesting. Rest of the year that labor is free, that can be used efficiently whenever they are free in vegetables, in piggery, or whenever they are free in livestock, and in taking care of these poultry animals. Okay, regular returns. Income from this comes in every 6 months, let's say every 2 months, or once in a year. Regular income plus once in a year. These are regular income in terms of they also feed you, plus also give you money, on a daily basis, from selling eggs and all. Okay, so these are the advantages. And what are the disadvantages? There are lots of things to buy and manage, buy and sell. So you'll definitely be having problems in marketing those products in the best possible channel, best possible way. Sometimes you might end up selling things to people, or end up selling things in a place where they are, you might be selling them cheap. Okay, if you had more time, you might have looked for better channels to sell your product to. It is not easy to supervise all these things at once. You will be needing a lot of equipment for all the enterprises you are following. And checking leakages, there might be some leakages. You're not using your uh, money most efficiently when you are having a lot of diversified farming, because you might be buying some inputs needed for piggery at a retail price. Okay, also needed for, can say, livestock at retail prices, which you might have gotten for wholesale prices if you were only following livestock rearing or piggery. Okay, so that way your money is not being utilized in the best possible way, because you are having a lot of things at your hand. It is not easy to make best possible decisions for all these things when you are the only one working on the farm. Okay, it does help when you have a lot of labor, but generally a farm manager is one, and still it is difficult to manage those things in the best possible way. What is mixed farming? Mixed farming is generally crop production plus livestock rearing. You can just see 50-50 of the image. Okay, when these things have, let's say, 51-49, or you can say 48-48, and 2% from something else. Here, this is the proportion of income you are getting from livestock. This is from crops, and this is from something else. Okay, this is 10 to 49% of gross income. Total income, it's gross income is the quantity you have produced into the price. Okay, without deducting the input cost. What is the, let's say, advantages, or what are the advantages of mixed farming? Maintaining soil fertility. Dung can be used for, let's say, as an FIM for raising crops. Balance labor load. Whenever somebody is free from vegetable cultivation or crop cultivation, they can be used in livestock. Intensive cultivation. When you are engaged in only two things, you can definitely go for intensification. That means, can say, investing more and more into your crops for getting better returns. Higher returns, definitely byproduct of one is being used in the other, and can say which does help, which are complementary for each other. Advantages: farm byproducts, as I said here also, they are being used. One, the byproduct of one is being used here. The grass is being fed to the livestock, and the livestock in turn gives you the FIM and some other things. Okay. Next one, ranching. Ranching is, I think it's a new term for you. First, I'll show you a picture, then you'll understand what ranching is. This is ranching. A cowboy on public land raising, can say feeding uh, cattle. So they are essentially grazing on public land, and this cowboy is taking care of them or guarding them. This is a very big area. What happens to, what does these animals give to him? Milk and milk products. Plus, when they get old, they are sold to slaughterhouses. Okay, so they're necessarily they are not giving in anything despite taking care of these animals. The land is public, the grass is for free, and they're just earning money from milk products and from meat products. Raising herds of animals on large tracts of land which are essentially public. Livestock grazes on natural vegetation which is free. Multiply naturally. Okay, no special care is given to them. They use public land, as I said. Example: cattle. That is, cattle. The word cattle is generally used for cows throughout the world, and here also sheep and other animals also. I'll be mentioning them later on. What are these public lands where these cattle and sheep are being reared under ranching? Okay, what are these ranching areas called? Pampas. These are largely flat or slightly undulated areas, grasslands, you can say, where the cattle is being reared in the form of ranching. Pampas in the area of Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil in Southern America, and in Northern America, these are called prairies, USA. Okay, in Australia, I don't know the name for those particular areas. What do they call these flat uh, grazing lands? So, as I told you, milk and for slaughterhouses, these are the Australian shepherds being used for taking care of these animals, which do help them in, let's say, movement. This is a game associated that is called as rodeo, along with ranching, where they try to catch a calf. These are called as cowboys or cow herders. Girls are called as cowgirls or jillarus in Australia. Jillarus. These are some other animals in different parts of the world which are a part of ranching industry. Elk, bison, ostriches, elk, bison, ostriches, emus, and alpacas. These are alpacas. These are reared for their fur. Okay, just like sheep. Plus, this ranching industry is a big contributor in terms of greenhouse gas emission. Essentially, 20% of greenhouse gas emission comes from these ranches throughout the world. They are a big challenge. So, the picture is not at all rosy. It has a dark side. They are a threat to biodiversity because they need huge clear land with grass, so it comes at a cost. At some countries, the you can say the forests are being sacrificed for developing these huge grasslands. As I told you, in Americas and Australia, they transport livestock to industrial slaughterhouses at the end of their life for, let's say, for their income source. This is part of the ranching industry. Then comes dry farming, a type of farming where wherever there is less than 20% of annual rainfall and no other source of irrigation, the farming is not predominantly entirely dependent on the rain. This is called as dry farming, type of rain-fed farming. Okay, what are the farm management problems here? First of all, conserving the soil moisture and preventing the water that is falling on during the scanty rainfall. Okay, these are three major problems. How the crops are selected? Either the crops are drought resistant or drought evasive. Crop and drought resistant mean they reduce transpiration and stop growing during severe shortages like sorghum. Drought resistant, they resist to give out water. Drought evasive, they just evade drought. Before the drought comes, they have completed their main growth period. Okay. Then comes systems of farming. There are these five systems of farming: cooperative, collective, capitalist, state, and peasant. Just remember, we are going to talk about two O's here: ownership and operationship. Who owns those farms and how the daily life work is done on those farms. Owns those farms, who has the right on the ownership of these farms. कौन मालिक है? Okay. First, we'll be talking about the most, I can say, tricky one: cooperative farming. Cooperative simply means some farmers voluntarily came in, pooled their resources. That means they took their resources and brought them together. Resources include whatever machineries they have, whatever seed, feed, whatever inputs they have, plus their land, and they elected a management committee out of them. They came in together with everything they have and they elected few people on top of them who are going to decide what is to be done and how things are going to be done. A farmer generally retains the land on their right. The farmer who came together, they actually have the right on the piece of their land which they contributed. Okay. How the profit, once the elected government starts functioning, start deciding how things are going to be done, how the profit is being distributed. Profit is being distributed, let's say they grew a crop, sold it, so the proportion of, let's say, the total land with the cooperative was 100 acre. One farmer gave in 10 acres of land, contributed 10 acres of land, so the 10% of produce will come to him. The returns from the 10% of land will come to him, plus the work he has done as a labor, the wages that he has earned. This is going to be income of the participant. Land plus wages. Land, it essentially means the proportion of produce that comes from your land. Okay. They are cooperative farming is of four types, which we'll be discussing right now: cooperative better, joint, tenant, and cooperative collective farming. Cooperative better simply means a better version of this cooperative farming. Better means here the ownership is with the farmer who has contributed the land. The ownership of that land is with that farmer, not the elected management. Okay. And operationship is also with the individual. This elected management told the farmers that we all should grow this particular crop. Okay. What the management does is only some jobs are done jointly. Let's say this management provides inputs. Okay. This management, what they did was they pooled their resources and bought a machinery, bought a tractor, a big tractor indeed, which does the job for all of the cooperative farmers. Okay. Whatever the jobs for a tractor are. So these are some of the better points than cooperative farming. Cooperative better, that means all the good points of cooperatives plus some jobs that are being done jointly. Let's say land preparation, all the farmers are going to prepare the land for the crop jointly. Okay. Everyone is going to help the other person, not somebody is not going to say me first or him why me last. Then comes cooperative joint. Here also, here not also here ownership and operationship is common. All the people sacrifice their, they just can say give the land to the common management, also the resources. Whatever is being done is being done jointly. How the person is going to earn, how a single farmer out of the cooperative is going to earn, he is going to earn the dividend in proportion of the land he has contributed plus the wages for which he has worked plus the time for which he has worked, simply similarly to what here was. Only difference is ownership and operationship is common. Everything that is being done commonly. It was decided by elected management which owns the land and the resources now. Okay. A farmer does not own anything. Now cooperative tenant. Tenant simply means kirayadar. Cooperative को आपने अपने सारे रिसोर्सेज और लैंड सरेंडर कर दिए, ओके, what it will do is then you will become a tenant. You can ask for the some part of land that you will be cultivating. The society will be providing you with some inputs. If you need some credit, seed, manure, marketing of your produce, the society will help you in marketing of your produce. And tenant, as you as a tenant will pay them rent to the society, and you can produce or sell anything you want, okay. So cooperative tenant, everything, all the small farmers have come together, surrendered their land to an elected management. Everything is common. Now the society is going to rent out that land to see. Many farmers, they do not want to cultivate. They just, because they have a small portion of land, they came together, made a pool of, let's say, 100 acres. Now 1 acre farmers, 100 farmers came together, made a pool of 100 acres. Now only, let's say, 50 farmers are willing to cultivate land. So 2 acres per farmer is given out. They will be paying in rent and they can cultivate whatever they want. In turn, the society will be providing them these things, okay, so making things easy for them. Cooperative collective, it is similar to a cooperative joint. These are very similar. The only thing is, after surrendering, there is no right to the land. Here the right of the land is with the farmer. Here also the right of the land is with the farmer, okay. The land is held by the society, but the actual owner is the farmer. Here the farmer has lost the right to the land. Profits are paid to the members in proportion to the work they have done and capital they have contributed. So these are essentially four types of cooperative. Cooperative simply means coming together, cultivating crops. What do you get in return? Proportional crop that you have grown plus the wages that you have earned. Types of cooperative: cooperative better, some jobs are done jointly, ownership and operationship is individual, okay. Cooperative joint, just remember this term joint. Ownership and operationship is common, everything is common. What are you going to get in return? Dividend, according to the proportion of crop that was, let's say you contributed 10 acres of land. The crop that came out, let's say, out of the total crop, your out of the total area, your area was 5%. So out of the total crop, you will be getting 5% of the crop, okay, plus the wages that you will be for your work. Cooperative tenant, this is far by far the easiest. Land and everything is common, although the right remains with the farmer. Then it is rented out to the farmers who are willing to cultivate. They will be paying rent for it. They can grow whatever they want and sell to whomsoever they want. The society will be providing them some services. Cooperative collective, everything is collective, no right to land, and profits are paid according to the work they do and according to the money they contribute. Then comes collective farming. Collective farmings, uh, just remember this one: collective farming, and members surrender everything they have: land, livestock. Dead stock means machinery, and everything is surrendered to the society. They will elect a management committee which will allocate the work, distribute the income, market the surplus if they have, and the main source of income is through labor earnings, because the farmers who are coming together for collective farming are very small, okay. Capitalist farming, this is followed by people who are landlords, let's say big landlords, people who are running the farming business for profit motive. These days it seems senseless to talk or say that farmers, there are some farmers who are not doing farming for profit motive. Everyone is doing farming for profit motive. Well, back in 1960s, when this term capitalist farming came up, most of the farmers used to do subsistence farming. They did not produce crop for selling purposes, but for feeding themselves or and their family. Essentially, when some people who had a lot of land and some people who grew interest in farming as a business, they, you can call them entrepreneurs. They bought some land, leased or rented land to pursue farming with scientific techniques for profit motive. Okay, for running agriculture as a business, profit motive, this is a main character of capitalist farming where hired labor use is more than family labor use. This was a particular character in 1960s for capitalist farm, but these days it is very common to see people hiring in labor for, even for the jobs they have people sitting idle in their house. Okay, they'll not be harvesting their crop themselves, they keep sitting in their houses idle but higher labor. So this characteristic is typical for capitalist farming. Advanced technology is being used and profits are being reinvested. This is also important. These two things are very important. The profits that a farmer, that a entrepreneur or a capitalist farmer earns are being reinvested in the farm for buying new machinery, for intensifying or can say increasing their crop production. Okay, capitalist farming is, let's say, farming done for profit motive. Labor is hired, profits are reinvested, advanced technology, uh, profit is the, let's say, primary objective. Then comes state farming. State farming generally means government farms managed by government officials. Workers whosoever are employed either are on wages or on salaries. Okay, research work is facilitated under state farming. Generally, HU farms are all state farms or can be considered as state farm because they are utilized for research and can say some seed production also. Products and byproducts are used or sold. Some of the products, let's say seed produced by HU is being sold. Byproducts, let's say along with the seed of cotton, there comes lint, which the seed was main product. Seed by the lint here is actually a byproduct. It generally is not a byproduct. Byproduct is the wood that comes in along with the cotton. But for HU, the lint is the byproduct which is being sold here. Okay. Peasant farming. Peasant generally mean a farmer. Okay, so what do we mean by farmer farming? Farmers generally were called, were historically were of three types. Rural peasants, rural people were of three types: rich, middle, and poor farmers. Okay, so we are talking here about middle and poor farmers. These characteristics are of middle farmers and these are of poor farmers, or can say real, these two are real peasants. Okay, these middle farmers, their whole family is engaged, work is divided among the family members. Some of the family members are, can say, assigned the work of taking care of the animals, taking the animals out for grazing purposes and taking care of livestock. Some are, after some are given the task of looking after kitchen gardening, maybe the kids, and taking care of the poultry. The peasants work more during busy seasons of sowing and harvesting, as whole family is engaged during the farming, during the whole period of farming. But during the busy seasons, they work more, even during day and nights. Okay, for sowing and harvesting times, so that they can save the money of labor as much as possible. But in case of poor peasants, this was the story of middle peasants. Poor peasants, they do not have land enough to take care of their family, to produce enough food for their family. That's why they rent land for taking care of the family and earn a little bit of money, or you can say supplement income. They supplement income by their income by working on as labor on the other farms. So this is called peasant farming. Okay, poor middle income farmers and, I can say, poor farmers, what kind of farming they do, this is called as peasant farming. Summary of systems of farming: cooperative, better, joint, tenant, collective. Okay, cooperative, better, everything is individual ownership, and operationship I told you was individual, only some things are done commonly. Let's say, can say, uh, what the example I gave you was of land preparation. This is done commonly, other things are done, can say, individually. Cooperative, joint farming, Ownership is individual, the farmer is the actual owner of the land, but operations are done jointly, and a farmer gets dividend in terms of proportion of land he has given to the cooperative plus wages for his work he is doing. Cooperative tenant. See, ownership is gone, ownership is collective. The actual right lies with him, say, with himself. He can withdraw whenever he wants. But the operationship is individual. The land is pooled and then rented out to the participants who are going to pay rent and produce whatever they want. Cooperative collective. O and O is common. Okay, everything is common. You just surrender yourself to the elected management and they'll decide what to do, and main source of income is labor earnings. Okay, now comes collective farming society, just similar to this, surrendered everything to the society and they will decide what's best for you, and marketing of some surplus produce you have, and main source of income is labor. Capitalist farming, farming done by the individual and operations are also done by the individual. The main purpose is profit, using best possible technology to produce crops for profit. State farming, the owner is state and operation is done by paid management in terms of government officials who are being paid salaries or wages for research purposes. Okay, peasant farming, the ownership is individual. Peasant farming, essentially two middle or poor. Ownership is individual. These farmers, their whole family is engaged. These poor farmers, whole family is engaged, but land is not enough, so they rent in and plus do work as a labor to fulfill their needs. Now let's talk about what do we mean by size of a farm. Size of a farm we generally mean is, we talk about physical area in general terms, how much area in terms of acres or hectares do a person has. Okay, and in economic terms we mean what is the volume of production and what is the value of production in terms of rupees. Okay, how much is produced and what is its market worth. There are two terms related with the size of a farm: minimum efficient size and economic size. Minimum efficient size means the amount of land that keeps the farming family completely employed. They do not need to go anywhere else for can say working. They do not have it can say spare time to work anywhere else. Plus the income is sufficient to sustain himself and his family. The income is just sufficient to sustain. They are just living out of it. They are not can say in a position to save and build house or buy something. Okay, this is the minimum efficient size. Then comes economic size. This all the factors of production are wholly owned by the farm. Let's say a family does need farming does need a tractor. They do need harvesting machinery. So a farm which has all the things it needs. Nothing, it does not need to rent in anything. Okay, it has a tractor, it has harvesting machinery, etc. It has all the tools it is going to need. This size is somewhat larger than the minimum efficient size, because here they are just sustaining. Here the size is good enough so that they even have all the machinery to do. So the size needs to be large because these investments are big. So you need to have a lot of land to earn money to buy these things. They have a good standard of living. Okay, the standard of living here is bare minimum. The only the essential things are being provided for by the farm. They are producing sufficient to support the family after paying necessary expenses. So it's simple. If you have a good standard of living, that means your farm is giving out is giving you enough produce so that you can take care of the family, sell it in the market, and buy things which are maintaining your standard of living. You are having electricity, water connection, you're having a paka roof over your head, you might have a transportation facility like a car or a bike. Okay, and it is not easy to determine the economic size of a farm of for a country as a whole, because India, let's say, it's a very diverse country. If it is a country in Europe, you can essentially determine the economic size of a farm, because they are very homogeneous. India, which is heterogeneous, so heterogeneous that you cannot just talk about an economic size of a farm. Economic size in Rajasthan, where the rainfall is not good, in parts of Rajasthan where the rainfall is not good, might be 50 acres of land might be needed for providing a good standard of living. Okay, but in the other part of Rajasthan, only 10 acres of land is okay. In the hilly areas, maybe 2 acres of land might be enough. Okay, so it depends on fertility and location of the farm. Okay, irrigation facilities are there or not. In the same village, there might be a farm with assured irrigation because it is close to the canal, and in this very same village, there might be a farm where that water of that canal doesn't reach, and it is following dry farming. Okay, because there is no groundwater. So it depends on a lot of things. It's not easy to determine an economic size of a farm for a big area. Okay, different types of crops are grown in different areas, and because of the climatic condition, amount of the capital available for investment and managerial capacity of the farmers, this is also a factor in determining the economic size of a farm. So this is also a classification of types of farm based on the size. Okay, marginal, five classification: marginal, small, semi-medium, medium, and large. Marginal is less than 1 hectare, that is 2.5 acres, less than 2.5 acres. Small is 2.5 acres to 5 acres. This again 5 acres to 10 acres, 10 acres to 25 acres, and greater than 25 acres. So you can just see for yourself in which category do you fall, or you can just experiment it out in which category your grandfather was, and in which category your father is right now, and in which category you are going to be as a let's say as an owner of farmland. Just see that the land size is reducing. This size, your grandfather might be a large farmer, but you might be a small farmer or even a marginal farmer. This is due to our law of inheritance, not the genetics ones. Law of inheritance, which leads to land fragmentation. That means passing on the property, which is mandatory for a father to pass on the property or divide the property in between their children. Okay, this is the law of inheritance for economic terms, which leads to land fragmentation. If a father has two sons and a daughter, there are going to be three parts of the land in the coming time. So this is land fragmentation, dividing the land in small fragments. These are some interesting facts from starting from 1970s to 2015-16. Just look at them. The proportion or percentage share of marginal farmers having less than 2.5 acres of land. How many farmers were these? 17.58% of the total farms were marginal farmers. Total farmers were marginal farmers. Okay, only 17% were marginal. Now the proportion has increased to nearly 50% of farmers in India are marginal farmers. This is only due to land fragmentation. So I think you now can fathom what is the main reason for the farmers of India getting smaller and smaller, owning less and less land. Small size 2.5 acre to 5 acre, they have increased from 17.5% to 19.28. This one, semi-medium farmers used to be a big proportion. Semi-medium and medium farmers used to be a big proportion of the Indian farming industry, but now they collectively own 30%. Earlier they were like 60%, and now they are 30%. Okay. Also, the large farmers have reduced from 5.62% to 2.5%. They have also nearly half. So this is due to land fragmentation. These data is collected in agriculture census. You can see the gap of these years. Agriculture census is conducted every 5 years, and this was the first agriculture census 1970-71. Some interesting statistics: the average size of holdings in terms of hectares. Okay, as per agriculture census, latest agriculture census, this is the largest farmers are from Nagaland, then from Punjab, then from Arunachal Pradesh, and Haryana is ranking fifth. Okay, and the Indian average is average farmer in India owns just like 2.6 acres. Okay, and in Kerala it is the least. Why there is high, the average size of holding is high in these areas and lower in these areas than the average? There are different reasons for different states. Okay, these are just some facts. Haryana is on the fifth one, Arunachal Nagaland is on the first one, Punjab second, and all India average is 1.08 hectares. Also, some more interesting facts: average farm size in Haryana has fallen. In 1970-71 it was 2.75 acres. Now it is 2.22 hectares, not acres, sorry, hectares. Okay, whereas this is for the complete population of Haryana. Okay, and whereas the SC population, scheduled caste population for Haryana, the average land holding size was 1.98 hectare. Now it has fallen to 1.58 hectare. Plus, the average land holding of India has reduced from 2.28 to drastically to 1. Okay, there are some states pulling this average down far more than Haryana. Okay, you can see it. So, what are the factors that affect the size of a farm? Why the size of farms are bigger in some states, smaller in the other ones? Uh, or why do they vary in between farmers, also in between villages or different regions? First of all, the money that a farmer has at hand decides how much of a farm he can sustain, how much of crop acres he can cultivate. Okay, if he has less money, then he can go for less area. If he has more money at hand, he can go for cultivating more area of land. Okay, density of the population: if the population density is high, generally the average size of land holding will be low, because more and more farmers will be demand, people will be trying to have rights on their land. Okay, the law of inheritance: in India there is a law of inheritance which makes it mandatory for a father or for a father to pass on their land to their sons or daughters. Okay, but in New Zealand there is no such law, so the average size of land holding more or less remains the same. Okay, there are many more countries. You might try to find out about those countries which do not have such kind of inheritance laws. State laws: some states in India, like in Haryana, there is a land ceiling of 30 acres, I think. If a farmer has more than 30 acres of land, it will be taken away from him and given away or redistributed to people who do not have it. Okay, so the state laws also affect the land size. Climate area: dry climate generally leads to more area, because more area is needed to sustain a family, like in Rajasthan. And wet climate area, let's say in mountainous areas where there is plentiful of rainfall, can lead to low land average size of land holding. Also, it does depend on the population, as the first place is of Nagaland has the average size of land holding is 5.62 hectare. Then how can I say that? And it is also wet. Then how can I say wet area does have low average land holding? See, there are different factors, but generally wet areas have, let's say, wet areas have low average size of land holding. There are different factors at play in Nagaland, because let's say the population density is very low. Okay, that's why the average size of land holding is high here, but in other wet areas it is generally low. Topography: in plain areas, the land holding sizes, average land holding is low. Undulated and mountainous areas, it varies according to the topography. I cannot say according to facts and figures which area has more or less, but it does vary. These factors do affect. Nature and source of irrigation. If the source of irrigation is a perennial river, scanty rainfall, or there is a canal that runs in every 7 days, every 15 days, or it runs all throughout the year. What is the amount of rain that the area is receiving? What is the status of groundwater level that the area has? So these two affect the size of the land a person has. Nature of crops that are grown. Plantation crops are in the area where one person has a lot of land, because these plantations or estates are big in area. Vegetables, let's say these are practiced by mostly farmers who have small area and large family labor. Okay, you can find these such kind of farmers nearby in places of Hisar and Haryana as well. Nature of farming that is being done. Capitalist farm tend to have bigger size. Okay, peasant farming tend to have smaller size because they generally cannot afford to rent in a lot of land. Okay, because they do not have money. Managerial capacity high, then a farmer can manage lots of amounts of land. They can rent in a lot of land, lease in a lot of land, and if a person is not a good manager, he will try to have less and less of land. Okay. Factors that determine the type of farming. It's simple. What kind of a farming, mixed, specialized, diversified, poultry, piggery, which kind of farming will be followed depends on the physical factors first. What kind of a climate is there, is soil or topography. They essentially decide the physical limits of what kind of crops can be cultivated in an area. Extremely dry and let's say a climate with no rainfall at all, they cannot undertake paddy cultivation. They'll have to go with millets. Okay, so these are the physical limits set out by physical factors. Uh, Now the choices among millets will be decided by economic factors. Okay, what are the marketing costs of different types of millets? Low marketing cost. Let's say one millet has less marketing cost. One millet is sold at far away places and has high marketing cost. So when you will be selling your crop, and when you will be selling your crop, it is easy to market one and difficult to market the other. That's why it depend these this factor helps in deciding which crop will be chosen. Availability of labor and capital. Farm enterprises requiring intensive operations require good amount of labor involvement and capital. They need labor plus money. Labor and capital intensive farming in a region brings about migration of labor from one region to the another region. It simply says whatever the enterprise you are going to choose, you will have to look in the labor that is going to be required and the money that is going to be required. Then only you are able to decide. Okay, land value. And there is a practice of people from HAU or early students from HAU. They are buying land in areas of Maharashtra, MP, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, because there are low land values. Okay, and these enterprising farmers, or you can say entrepreneurs, they are doing new types of farming there. They might be going in for banana cultivation. Okay, and in maybe for exotic fruits and vegetables. There are low land values plus cheap labor, extremely cheap labor, plus good quality water. Farmers, there are not the farmers who are already there, they do not have the money or the capital in hand to take benefit of the cheap labor and good quality land water. But the people who are from these areas and who know agriculture, they are going in those areas, checking in new crops that can be grown according to the climate, soil, and topography, and taking that enterprise for earning money. And another example is farmers from coastal Andhra Pradesh buying low value land in Karnataka and introducing intensive cotton and rice farming. These are just opportunist people who saw an opportunity, saw that land is cheap and other resources are available in good quantity and at cheap prices, and we can grow these crops apart from the general ones to have a good money. Okay, then come cycles of over and under production. Wait a second please. Cycles of over and under production, which leads to low prices and high prices. Whenever there is very high production, the prices sink in, and whenever there is prices, when the production is low, the prices increase. Okay, this is generally a sad state of affairs with agricultural commodities. Whenever the production is high, everyone's production is high because the climate was very good, so the prices fall down. This is particularly in case of vegetables. Okay, if the climate, if the weather conditions in Maharashtra area are good, okay, it leads to bumper production of onion, which leads to fall in prices. Because the demand of onion is more or less stable, it grows very slowly, because onion is not a product whose demand varies a lot year after year. It's very more or less same. So this is the demand of onion year after year. This was the supply earlier, and prices were, let's say, 10 rupees per kg. This year the supply increased due to good weather, so the prices fall down to 7 rupees per kg. This is called as poverty in plenty. Whenever there is good production, the prices fall down. Whenever there is less production, the prices move up. This is called as poverty in plenty. That means plenty may be garibi. This is a phenomenon. This is a real term. I'm not making things up. Okay. Competition between enterprises. Some of the capitalist farms who are growing vegetables and crops that are going to be exported, they are going to see if farmers in other areas or other countries are in competition or are in a better position of growing those crops. So these things will also decide what kind of crops they are going to grow. Okay, the competition between farmers. Personal likes and dislikes of a farming group. People sometimes just don't prefer to grow a certain crop even if they can. Okay, prevalence of pests and diseases. The occurrence of pests and diseases in an endemic fashion, that means it came in such a bad manner that everything was gone. Uh, Everything, like this whitefly problem is going on here in Haryana again and again, year after year, but farmers are still uh, continuing that crop. Although the area is reducing, but they are still going on with it. Similar thing happened in Guntur and Prakasam districts of Andhra Pradesh in 1985-86, where a whitefly attack reduced the cotton area by 40%. Okay, so the prevalence of pests and diseases, the risk of attack of pests and diseases also helps us choose what kind of farming we are going to do. Okay, now this is all for your unit 1. I thank you for your uh, it's just a recorded lecture. Thanks for your thanks for the time you will be putting in. These are the suggested reading. These two books, VT Raju and VT Raju Economics of Farm Production and Management, and this Reddy book, Agricultural Economics. You can find in the relevant chapter and read through it. Okay. Thank you very much. See you later on. Thank you.